What if the most shocking sound in modern celebrity culture wasn't a confession, a scandal, or a secret meeting, but a single voice note that none of us were meant to hear? What if a private recording, only seconds long, became the spark that set an entire fandom on fire and forced one of Asia's most carefully managed stars into the center of a storm he never asked for? This is the story of the voice recording that broke the internet. A story of timing, silence, shadows, and the sudden tightening of a management team that had guarded its star with near-military precision until now. It begins not with a headline, not with a rumor, but with a sound. A quiet, unassuming sound that carried the weight of something far greater than anyone expected. For days, the online world shook as fragments of a leaked audio clip circulated through forums, group chats, fan threads, and private messages. No one could confirm its source. No one could identify who leaked it. But everyone agreed on one thing. The voice in that recording sounded hauntingly, undeniably like Dylan Wang. That was all it took. Within hours, speculation mutated into certainty. Certainty hardened into outrage. And outrage evolved into a frenzy that drifted far beyond the boundaries of fandom. News pages picked it up. Influencer channels dissected every second. Editors froze frames of waveforms. Strategists studied tonal inflections. And while the world obsessed, the star at the center of it all said nothing. Silence became its own narrative. Then, quietly but unmistakably, the pressure shifted. Not toward Dylan, but toward the people who protect him. Dylan Wang's management had built a reputation for meticulous control. Every move, every project, every public moment was choreographed with surgical precision. They understood the industry, the machine behind the fame, and the cost of letting a narrative spiral unchecked. So when the recording spread like wildfire, they didn't respond immediately. They watched. They assessed. They calculated the weight of every potential outcome. And as the digital world argued about authenticity, motives, and meaning, something else was happening behind closed doors. The crafting of a highly strategic, deeply intentional response. Not the kind that denies. Not the kind that admits. But the kind that redirects. When their official statement finally arrived, it felt less like an explanation and more like an atmospheric shift. The tone was measured. The language was sharp. And the message beneath the message was unmistakable. Whoever leaked the audio, if the audio was even real at all, had violated trust, privacy, and boundaries that no fanbase should ever cross. They didn't name Dylan. They didn't mention the recording directly. They didn't confirm. They didn't deny. Instead, they framed the storm itself as the enemy. Suddenly, the story wasn't about the contents of a voice note. It was about digital ethics. It was about the invasion of a public figure's personal space. It was about the legality of circulating unverified or manipulated audio. It was about protection, loyalty, and the unseen pressures behind stardom. In one calculated move, they shifted the world's gaze. Comment sections transformed overnight. What had been accusations became questions. What had been excitement became hesitation. What had been certainty became doubt. Had the recording been doctored? Was it misinterpreted? Was it private? Was it even real? The mystery deepened, and the conversation changed shape. Dylan's management didn't need to attack the rumors. They merely reframed the battlefield. Where many expected a defensive explosion, what arrived instead was a shadowy, polished reminder that fame is not an invitation to surveillance. That artists, no matter how public, are still human. That the digital world has blurred lines that should never have been crossed. The genius of their response was not in what they said, but in what they refused to say. In the days that followed, new theories emerged. New debates ignited. New speculations twisted into yet more elaborate narratives. But something else happened too. The fever slowed. Fans began defending, rather than questioning. Analysts began second-guessing their certainty. Commentators began backtracking their earlier claims. In silence, Dylan Wang himself became larger, more enigmatic, more untouchable. And the voice in that mysterious recording, whatever its origin, faded into the vapor of digital noise, leaving behind only its echo. A reminder of how fragile the line is between public fascination and personal intrusion. Because in the end, the story of the voice recording that broke the internet was never just about what was said. It was about who listened, who reacted, who took advantage, and who stepped forward when the weight of the world tilted onto the shoulders of one young man who never asked for the spotlight to burn this brightly. Dylan Wong's management didn't just respond. They redefined the battlefield. They turned a digital wildfire into a quiet, controlled smolder. And in doing so, they reminded the world of a truth often forgotten. Sometimes the most powerful statement is the one wrapped in silence. Sometimes the loudest voice in the room is the one that chooses not to speak. And sometimes the real story isn't in the recording at all. It's in everything that followed after. It's in the shadows, the strategies, the whispers behind boardroom doors. It's in the way a single moment can expose the fragility of fame and the hunger of an audience desperate to know more than it should. This was not just a scandal. This was a reckoning. A reminder that in an age of endless noise, even a single voice can shake an entire industry. And the response, calm, deliberate, unyielding, can reshape the narrative of a star whose silence speaks louder than any leaked recording ever could. But the storm that followed the recording carried another consequence, one far more delicate, far more human, and far more dangerous than any public scandal. It cast a shadow over a connection that fans had quietly speculated about for years. Because while the world focused on the voice, the leak, the management response, another narrative was unfolding in the background. A narrative involving someone whose presence in Dylan Wong's life had long been whispered, studied, and endlessly debated.
Shen Yue.
For months, subtle clues had sparked conversations, shared glances at events, quiet overlaps in schedules, the lingering softness in interviews whenever her name surfaced. They had always been careful, always distant enough to maintain deniability, yet close enough for the observant to wonder. And now, with a single leaked voice note, that fragile balance was shattered. Insiders began to murmur that the timing of the leak was not random, that the sudden resurgence of Dylan and Shen Yue rumors in certain online spaces had irritated people behind the scenes, that the recording might not have been leaked merely to embarrass Dylan, but to disrupt a connection growing too quietly, too naturally, for those who preferred to control the narrative. The industry is no stranger to manipulation. But this felt personal. Because when a star falls into controversy, his relationships, real or rumored, are often the first casualties. In the days following the leak, fans noticed something strange. Shen Yue, usually quiet but steady online, disappeared into silence. Her posts froze. Her appearances reduced. Her world took on the same stillness that followed Dylan's. It was as if someone, somewhere, had whispered, "This is no time for headlines." But silence creates space. And in that space, questions grew. Did the voice recording contain something connected to her? Was the tension behind the scenes related to the two of them? Was the leak a warning, a disruption, or an attack on a relationship never meant for public consumption? No one could say. But observers couldn't ignore the pattern. Whenever Dylan and Shen Yue's names drifted too close together in the public eye, something always seemed to happen. A rumor, a leak, a narrative shift, a sudden wave of distraction that redirected attention elsewhere. And this time, the world began to notice. Industry analysts speculated that the management's unusually intense reaction wasn't just about protecting Dylan's image, it was about protecting everything and everyone connected to him, including her. Because if the recording had the slightest link to Shen Yue, emotionally, contextually, or even indirectly, it could ignite a wildfire neither actor was prepared to face. Their past collaboration had been too iconic, their chemistry too natural, their fan bases too intertwined. Their names, when spoken together, carried too much weight. A single spark could create a narrative that spiraled beyond control. And so, behind closed doors, decisions were made. Boundaries were reinforced. Interactions were reduced to almost nothing. Management circles whispered of minimizing exposure, lowering intersection, and avoiding speculation. Not because there was nothing between them, but because perhaps there was too much. Too much to risk. Too much to expose. Too much for a world always hungry for the next scandal. And yet, despite the tension and the silence, a quiet detail lingered, one that gave the story an entirely different edge. Shen Yue did not unfollow. She did not distance herself publicly. She did not act like someone trying to escape association. Instead, she did something far more subtle. She stayed still, and strangely unbothered. As if she understood something the public did not. As if she had seen storms like this before. As if she knew that silence sometimes protects more than statements ever could. In the eyes of fans, her calmness raised a new, haunting question. Was she staying silent to protect herself from the fallout? Or was she staying silent to protect him? Because in this industry, romantic connections are rarely simple. They are fragile, hidden things, tender threads pulled up by forces far larger than two people's emotions. And when a scandal erupts around one half of a rumored pair, the other inevitably feels the tremor. Somewhere in the background of this chaos, somewhere between the management statements, the digital uproar, and the tightening of control, the story of Dylan Wang's voice recording became entangled with something far more intimate. The possibility that this storm had touched the very thing they had fought to keep private. Shen Yue's absence, Dylan's silence, the management's precision, the timing of the leak, the sudden shift in online energy. When placed together, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. This wasn't just a scandal. It was an interruption, an interference, a disruption of a relationship, confirmed or not, that had quietly withstood years of speculation. And as the world continues to debate the authenticity of a recording, a far gentler, more vulnerable question lingers beneath it. What happens to a romance, real, rumored, or quietly unfolding, when the world listens to a voice it was never meant to hear? Perhaps the truest part of the story isn't the leak. It's what the leak endangered. Not a career, not a reputation, but a connection too delicate for the world to hold. And as the world watches, one thing becomes clear. This storm may have started with Dylan, but its shadow stretches all the way to Shen Yue.